Amid the frozen vastness of the Ural Mountains in Russia lies a location that holds one of the most intriguing mysteries of the 20th century, the Dyatlov Pass. In 1959, 9 experienced mountaineers, led by Igor Dyatlov, set out on an expedition to explore a remote and challenging region. They had no way of knowing that this journey would lead them to a fateful destination, creating a puzzle that continues to challenge investigators, scientists, and enthusiasts of the unexplained to this day. In late February of that year, when the group did not return as planned, rescue teams were mobilized to find them. What these teams discovered would become the center of endless speculation: a tent slashed from the inside out, footprints leading into the depths of the snow, and bodies found in such strange conditions that they seemed to defy all logic. How can the seemingly irrational behavior of such experienced mountaineers be explained? Why did they abandon their shelter in the midst of freezing temperatures, without proper clothing? And what caused the mysterious injuries found on their bodies? These questions, along with the bizarre evidence at the site, transformed the Dyatlov Pass into one of the greatest mysteries of modern history. Today, we will explore every detail of this fascinating case, from the initial tragedy to the theories that attempt to explain the unexplainable. Prepare to dive into an enigma that blends science, history, and the supernatural as we search for answers to what truly happened on that fateful winter night. The protagonists of this tragedy were young, full of energy and experience in high-complexity explorations. Igor Dyatlov, the leader of the group, was an engineering student who not only possessed great technical knowledge, but was also respected for his leadership and organizational skills. Alongside him were 8 other mountaineers, including Zinaida Kolmogorova, a young woman known for her bravery, Yuri Doroshenko, described as fearless, and Lyudmila Dubinina, whose determination stood out in any situation. The group also included Rustam Slobodin, a disciplined athlete, and Alexander Kolovatov, whose brilliant intellect contributed to the group's strategies. Yuri Krivonoshenko and Nikolai Thibault-Brignol were known for their teamwork and good humor, while Yuri Yudin, the only survivor for having abandoned the expedition before the worst occurred, later described his companions as a family. The group's goal was to cross a remote region known as Mount Otorten, a journey that required skill, preparation, and endurance. Equipped with tents, sleds, and supplies for weeks, they were prepared to face extreme conditions. The terrain, covered in snow and surrounded by rugged mountains, was intimidating even for the most experienced. However, for them, it was an exciting challenge. Departing from Vizhai, the last inhabited village before the trail began, the group headed toward the Ural Mountains. They documented every step of the journey in journals and photographs, leaving behind valuable records of their hopes and experiences. These records, however, would become the last traces of their lives, cut short by something that remains a mystery to this day. What was meant to be an adventure turned into a nightmare. Days after departure, the group faced extreme weather conditions and decided to set up camp on an exposed slope of Mount Kholat-Syakhl, translated as Mountain of Death. This decision would mark the beginning of a series of events that defied logic and human understanding. By the end of February 1959, when the days scheduled for the group's return passed without news, the families of the mountaineers began to worry. The delay led to the mobilization of search teams, composed of volunteers, military personnel, and even friends of the missing. The operation began with hope, but what would be found on the icy slopes of Mount Kholat-Syakhl would turn initial anxiety into horror. The first alarming signs were found on February 26th. The group's tent. It was ripped from the inside out, indicating that the mountaineers had fled in desperation. Inside the tent, their belongings were almost untouched, as if they had been abandoned in haste. The intense cold of the region made this action even more puzzling, as abandoning the protection of the tent without proper clothing seemed like a death sentence. Following the footprints left in the snow, rescuers found the first 2 bodies, barefoot and dressed only in underwear, near a tree. Remains of a makeshift fire suggested a desperate attempt to survive the cold. Further along, 3 more bodies were found, lined up heading toward the camp, as if they had been trying to return to the safety of the tent. Their frozen positions indicated extreme suffering. It was not until 2 months later, in May, that the remaining 4 bodies were discovered buried under meters of snow in a nearby ravine. These bodies showed injuries so severe that investigators were stunned. Intense internal fractures, similar to those caused by great impacts, contrasted with the absence of corresponding external injuries. In one case, a victim's tongue was missing, adding to the mystery. What could have caused such a tragedy? From here, we will explore the first official investigations, which raised more questions than answers. When Soviet authorities began investigating the case, the complexity of the tragedy became evident. The incident scene, already disturbing, revealed more details that defied any logical explanation. Initially, the cause of death was attributed to exposure to the cold and hypothermia. However, medical examinations revealed injuries so extraordinary that this initial conclusion was soon called into question. The 4 bodies found in the ravine had injuries that specialists compared to those from car accidents. One victim had a severely fractured skull. 2 others had broken ribs with severe internal damage. However, the strangest aspect was the absence of external trauma, such as bruises or cuts, that would normally correspond to such injuries. Additionally, some victims' clothing showed abnormal levels of radiation, a detail that added a new layer of mystery to the investigation. Authorities also could not explain the arrangement of the bodies. The apparent attempt by some climbers to return to the tent suggested extreme disorientation, while others seemed to have sought refuge in more remote areas, like the ravine. The discovery that one of the victims was missing a tongue fueled theories of animal attacks. But the positioning of the bodies and the nature of the injuries made this hypothesis unlikely. The official investigation was quickly closed, with the verdict that an irresistible natural force was responsible for the deaths. This vague and poorly detailed explanation left the victims' families and the public dissatisfied. Important documents were filed away or remain classified to this day, fueling suspicions that something was being covered up. If the official explanation seemed insufficient, the alternative theories that emerged over the years sought to fill in the gaps, exploring possibilities ranging from the mundane to the supernatural. Next, we'll examine these intriguing speculations. With the rapid and unsatisfactory closure of the official investigation, the void of answers gave rise to a flood of theories. Some sought scientific and natural explanations. Others explored supernatural events or government conspiracies. Let's delve into the most discussed theories, evaluating their evidence and contradictions. One of the most widely accepted theories is that an avalanche was responsible for the disaster. The idea is that the climbers, fearing the tent would be buried, ripped it open to escape quickly. This would explain their desperate flight and the abandonment of their belongings. However, experts point out that there were no signs of a snowslide at the site, and the severe injuries didn't align with the typical impact of an avalanche. Another hypothesis suggests that the climbers were victims of secret military tests. In the 1950s, the Soviet Union was conducting experiments with advanced weapons, including high-intensity bombs. The presence of radiation on some of the clothing and reports of strange lights in the sky from nearby witnesses fueled this theory. Critics, however, argue that the detected radiation wasn't enough to indicate a nuclear explosion, and military records from that time don't confirm activities in the area. Among the more supernatural explanations, the theory of an attack by a creature known as the Yeti gained popularity due to the reports of footprints in the snow. However, the lack of signs of a struggle and the specific nature of the injuries weaken this hypothesis. Other speculations include alien interference, due to the mysterious lights seen in the sky, and even local curses associated with the Mountain of Death, where the event occurred. Finally, a more recent and scientific theory suggests the phenomenon of catastrophic wind. Studies indicate that strong, irregular winds can produce intense, low-frequency sounds known as infrasound, which induce extreme panic. This could explain the climbers' disoriented behavior, although it doesn't clarify the severe injuries. While each theory has intriguing points, none fully explains all the details of the case. In the next chapter, we will explore the cultural impact and global obsession that the Dyatlov Pass mystery has generated. The Dyatlov Pass case transcended the borders of Russia and became a global phenomenon. Decades after the event, it continues to inspire books, documentaries, films, and a legion of amateur investigators. But what makes this mystery so captivating? Part of the answer lies in the peculiar balance between concrete evidence and inexplicable gaps. The photos and records left by the climbers offer a window into their lives and the expedition's atmosphere, creating an emotional connection with the audience. At the same time, the enigmatic elements of the case, the unusual injuries, the ripped tent, and the contradictory signs at the scene leave room for the imagination to fill the voids. Culturally, Dyatlov Pass also symbolizes humanity's struggle against the uncontrollable forces of nature. It highlights human fragility in the face of an extreme environment and the complexity of trying to comprehend events that defy conventional explanation. This balance between the tangible and the incomprehensible keeps the case relevant, evoking a mixture of awe and fear. Additionally, the historical context of the Soviet Union at the time adds another layer to the mystery. The atmosphere of governmental secrecy, restrictions on freedom of expression, and secret military tests created fertile ground for conspiracy theories. To this day, documents related to the case remain classified, reinforcing the feeling that something was concealed. For the victims' families, however, the mystery is a heavy burden. Despite the public fascination, they seek more than just explanations. They desire justice and a dignified closure to the tragedy. Recently, additional investigations and scientific advances have attempted to provide answers, but the full truth may never be known. Dyatlov Pass serves as a reminder that some mysteries may remain unsolved, but that is exactly what makes them so intriguing. They challenge us to explore, question, and imagine. Perhaps the greatest legacy of this case is the power to make us reflect on the limits of human knowledge.